Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the OPT Network. This morning, we're talking about a subject that 18.1 million Americans are dealing with, and that is anxiety, anger, fearfulness, and depression. Many forms of emotional turmoil that get us down. If you're feeling stuck and emotionally uncertain, our guest this morning has got some real clear answers for you. His name is William Pullen. He joins us all the way from across the pond in London, England. He is a psychotherapist registered with the British Association for Counseling and Psychotherapy. He practices integrative therapy and specializes in the treatment of depression, anxiety, self-esteem, and confidence, also substance abuse. He joins us to talk about his new book entitled Running with Mindfulness, DRT, aka Dynamic Running Therapy to Improve Low Mood, Anxiety, Stress, and Depression. William, good morning and welcome.
Well, good afternoon to you from over here, but good morning to you.
Good afternoon to you. Thank you for joining. First of all, when I read the book, and I want to add this caveat right off the top, you're not necessarily talking about running, but it could also be running. Tell us, first of all, what DRT, or Dynamic Running Therapy, is.
Okay, so it's a kind of way of addressing various, pretty much any emotional issue that you may have. And as you were saying, it could be walking as well. I think the movement piece in there, it's just really about addressing what's happening inside you while moving. And if running is your thing, then run. If walking is the best you can do, then walk. Just try and walk a little bit faster. But it's definitely about movement.
And so at the very beginning of the book, you talk about specifically, or you write about, how to use this book. Let's talk about that.
Okay, so the book is sort of broken up into pieces. It is as it describes about mindful running. So if you've never done mindful running before, there's programs on how to do that, as well as mindful walking and as well as straight meditation.
Okay, let's stop there. Mindful running, mindful walking, mindful movement. What are they?
Well, mindfulness, as you probably know, because it's very popular at the moment, is an ancient Eastern practice, which is much easier than it sounds, or much harder than it sounds. I don't know, it depends on how you're coming at it. But essentially all you're doing is trying to favor or focus on what's happening right here in the here and now, so that in this moment now you can fully occupy this moment. What we tend to do is we tend to get stuck in our heads, and we're constantly reflecting on regrets or worrying about the future, and we're churning over stuff. And it means that we're not really connected with ourselves, and we can't really enjoy where we are. So it's a practice that primarily through concentrating on breathing, but sometimes footfalls, sometimes counting trees, allows you to come into the here and now and occupy this minute in your life. And after all, there is only ever really this minute, isn't there?
Absolutely. And I like what you wrote about how you came into the practice for yourself. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Well, you know, I guess like a lot of people, I've had some up moments and some down moments in my life. And about 10 years ago, 11 years ago, I was going through one of the down moments in my life. And it was a real struggle. I didn't really know what to do with myself. And so I sort of threw everything I had at it, which included psychotherapy and yoga, and I took up running. I tried everything, anything but to be at home alone, miserable and scared. And then what I noticed, and at that time I was living, to put it mildly, a very unhealthy lifestyle. What I noticed was that the running bit, which started off at sort of 100 meters with a friend, really it helped give me a focus to my life. It was at a time when I didn't know how to deal with what was going on inside of me emotionally. What I did know was I really enjoyed going out there and trying to see if I could add on another 30 meters to my run today, because it made me feel confident. It empowered me. And it made me feel like I was doing something to help myself, not just physically, but emotionally. And I was lucky enough to find myself running with an American friend who happened to also be going through a divorce. And together we talked about our problems, and I saw how running really helps you get in touch with those thoughts. It helps create a narrative. I think all of us that have been on a road trip before, and I'm sure you have, where you find yourself sharing the most intimate things with somebody in the back of a Greyhound bus or on a car trip somewhere. It sort of helps conversation, doesn't it? It's quite an intimate thing to travel with somebody.
Mm-hmm. And so you really talk about movement and how movement really affects everything, every part of our being.
Yes, and I because I think movement is natural. As you probably heard, they call sitting the new smoking. It really is terrible for you. We're in these bodies. We're supposed to use them. And not even, I run a lot, obviously, but even running can be a problem in the sense that one's only using a set number of muscles and movements. And so you can become, the rest of your body can become quite stiff. And so really these bodies of ours are supposed to be used, and they're supposed to be used outside, and they're supposed to be used in all sorts of ways. And when we do use them, I believe that leads to good mental health and a sense of happiness and engagement in the world.
Sure. And then you wrote about that inner dialogue and meeting whatever you find, you write, with acceptance. And that's not always an easy, acceptance and patience, that's not always an easy recipe, is it?
No, I don't think so. I mean, how would you characterize your own, just so your listeners are clear, when we say in a dialogue, we're talking about that, the language, the voice with which we talk to ourselves. How would you rate yours? What would you say your strengths and weaknesses are?
In terms of what I'm saying to myself and what I'm speaking to myself?
Yes. Is it positive and thoughtful? Are you conscious of the impact of the choices that you make in the language, or are you prone to negativity or repetitive thoughts that don't help you? Or how would you rate it?
And I thought a lot about it as I was reading the book, because the book is, for me and for people who will read it, it's really a self-seeking book of one's self and one's emotions. And I thought a lot about that. And there are times that I would say to anyone that I am a cup full kind of girl or kind of woman. And there are other times that I would say that I am probably harder and not as kind to myself as I could be. So I would say it's about 50-50.
Right. Well, I think that's probably a pretty common number, actually, amongst people who are holding down a job and reasonably happy in their lives. For those who are undergoing a crisis, particularly depression, obviously depression being characterized by extreme negativity and despondency, that'll be 90-10 or 95-5
Wow.
or 99-1. And it's crippling when that language is so negative and it reinforces itself. And then the choices you start to make beyond the language start to reinforce what the language you're using. So you start to isolate, and then from there you start to tell yourself you have no friends. And actually it all originates with some ideas and some thoughts and some language. So the book really asks you to look, and I think this is really what the book's about from beginning to end, in a sense, is what do we do with unpleasant ideas and feelings and thoughts that we have? Can we find a way to live comfortably with them? Or do we believe that avoidance or trying to fix it works? And my belief working as a therapist, my belief in my own life is that there is no fixing, there's no avoiding. There are always going to be elements of ourselves which we struggle with, and elements of other people we struggle with, and the world around us as we see other people's suffering that can hurt us just as much as our own suffering.
Absolutely.
And so we have to do something with that.
So let me do this, William. Let's get a break here. But when we come back, let's talk about how we do something with it, and also something that you have written in the book, creating your own mantra. We're talking about running with mindfulness. Stay on point. We're back right after this. Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. Our guest this morning is psychotherapist William Pullen, and we're talking about his book, Running with Mindfulness. And it's DRT, or Dynamic Running Therapy, to improve low mood, anxiety, stress, and depression. And before we went to a break, William, we were talking about those things that people are dealing with that maybe they don't want to deal with. And what we know for sure is that the statistics say that 18.1 million Americans are dealing with some sort of anxiety, stress, fearfulness, and the like. And most people, or many of those, are medicating. But you are suggesting that there is a new way, another way to deal with those feelings. Let's talk about that.
Yes, I mean, I would, for people who need medication, for people who are profoundly anxious or profoundly depressed, clinically depressed, obviously I recommend medication for them. But I believe that a lot of mental illness and unhappiness is caused by lifestyle choices and the values that we hold to be true about ourselves and other people, and we end up acting on well or poorly. So with my clients, and in the book, I ask people to examine what choices do you make in your life. And what are you doing to make yourself feel good? Are you involved in your community? Are you getting out? Are you running? Are you using your body? Do you ever set yourself challenges? Or has your life become repetitive? And I think, if your life's become repetitive, if you've chosen safety, then safety in the end becomes boring, and then that becomes depression. If you've chosen all of that, then think again and choose life, is I suppose what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Choose life. And you talk about the psychological or the spiritual power. You said it's like creating a mantra. You said as you navigate your way through DRT process, you might want to develop a mantra of yourself.
Yes, I think some people get a sense of what's really, it's one of those light bulb moments that I think is particularly can come to you with DRT because you are using the body. And I don't know, I think when you get that movement happening with the body, the mind sort of springs forth too, and things pop up and out. And I think mantras, some people believe, Buddhists believe, are sort of gifts and almost tailored for you. Wherever they come from, the important thing is that they make sense. One that I like very much is good enough is good enough. That's one of my favorite ones. Because I think so many of us are dealing with issues around competency or around being attractive enough, strong enough, whatever. So just understanding that just how you are is good enough.
I like that one, and I'm gonna adopt that. Good enough is good enough, because Excellent. I don't think that many of us really think that good enough is ever good enough.
Well, and I have a lot of sympathy for, and I used to live in America. I love America. I'm hoping to move back there. Well, one of the things I love about it is what a positive place it is. But the other side of that positivity, that other side is that constant competition that's over there, and the possibility of fame and fortune, I think, leads a lot of people to feel like they're not good enough, and so just trying to get people into a place where they remember that actually the primary experience in the world is an internal experience and belongs to you and is shared with the people around your internal life. It is not, your measurement is not taken by who you are in the country as a whole. And things like wealth and position will not provide you with the happiness and comfort that you will find in a family or a community.
When did you come to such wisdom? And how cathartic was this book, writing this book for you?
Oh, it was really good. I mean, my story's been quite, I won't shock your listeners, but there's been all sorts of bits and pieces and ups and downs. And, I think it's hard won. I was always interested in psychology, and I studied in college. But yeah, the book brings together everything from everything that I believe in as a psychotherapist, everything that comes to me as which I felt in my body while doing running therapy. It's not an incredibly complex thing, really, at the end of the day. If you think about it, just running and dealing with yourself, it's pretty basic stuff, and very few of us do it.
Right. And I really want to make the point that it's not just for people who are runners, but people who are willing to move and within that movement start to do a self-analysis of really who they are, why they are, and where they are.
Yeah, for sure. There are chapters in there, programs specifically for all sorts of conditions, depression, anxiety, anger, relationship issues, decision-making, to name but a few. And each one has a whole program and questions you'll run with. And if you look in the book, you'll see there are areas where you take your notes. And so journaling is an important part of it. And you become familiar with who you are and where you are and how you got there. And as you run with that.
And when you say run, sometimes you could use run as a metaphor. When you run with that, not necessarily literally run, but as you start to move with that.
Yes, absolutely. I'm using it somewhat in that sense. No, absolutely. As long as you're moving, and I do want people to try and get the blood moving a bit. So
right.
If you can walk, just try to walk a little bit faster, because it's in that effort, it's in that commitment, in that expression, in that investment of energy and stamina that I think that we start to discover and unlock and reveal. And
sure. And one of the things that you wrote that I thought was very interesting, and I want you to expound on it, you write, go with the feeling, not the thoughts, a reminder to allow myself to accept unpleasant feelings rather than trying to think or discuss them away.
Yes, it's a way of just, I think comfort and it comes in this world comes from self-acceptance, and self-acceptance comes from acknowledgement. It comes from saying, well, this is something that's happening, rather than pretending that I haven't just felt that or that this doesn't exist. It's to say, no, okay, so I am somebody who at times feels this. Can I be okay with that? And the minute I'm okay with it, counterintuitively, actually, it becomes much less of an issue. And too many of us are spending our lives trying to, and we have to watch out of this in the wellness industry, is too many people are trying to use wellness to become perfect, and nothing will make you more imperfect more quickly than trying to achieve perfection. The way to a more perfect life is to accept the imperfection that you have, work on that and dealing with that.
Now that is a job. How do you begin to accept the imperfection, especially in a world where perfection is so lauded? Hold that thought. We're going to take a break here, but when we come back, we're going to explore all of those emotions. Stay on point. We're back right after this. Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. Our guest this morning joins us all the way from London, England, talking about something that is relatively new to the United States and to people who are dealing with anxiety, with fear, with depression, with all those bevy of emotions that really prevent us from being and presenting in life as our best selves. The book is called Running with Mindfulness, Dynamic Running Therapy, or DRT, to improve low mood, anxiety, stress, and depression. And before we went to the break, William, we were talking about really dealing with one's self. And throughout the book, you give some interesting concepts about anxiety and about really self and what we're saying to ourselves. And you also ask the reader to begin to discover who they really are. And for a lot of people, I don't know if we think about who are we really? I mean, sometimes we identify with our job, with our title, as a mother, as a teacher, as a professional, but who are we really? Let's talk about how you begin to explore that if you never have.
Well, there's a big piece in there about journaling. In the book, I talk about how you're going to run with the various questions, and you can run with those as often as you like. Each one you can run with several times, or only run with the ones that seem like they fit. As you journal about that, things will come up for you. You'll loosen up your understanding of yourself, and things will come to you. It will come closer to you because you're sort of running with them and writing, and you're engaged in this momentum and this practice. And from there, I think that themes will start to come up, and you'll start to see, for instance, the role that fear has played in your life or plays in your life today. Or perhaps you'll notice how a certain kind of negativity around relationships seems to really characterize. And so it's about really taking note of those things and saying, actually, no, that is me. And perhaps you can work out how you became that person. But that's very different, I think, from what we often do, which is to see that stuff and just go, oh, well, I'll try and work around that.
Well, I think one of the things that I took away from the book and that readers will take away as well is that it really all centers around owning the shortcomings in your own life, really owning that and putting that out there. And most of us want to just skim over those things that don't serve us instead of really confronting those things.
Yeah. I mean, I often think of this. Do you remember when you were at school and only sort of 8 years old, and you do badly, or you'd hand in your homework late, and you think literally you could sort of be expelled for that, or something worse, maybe go to prison. It felt like something enormous that you were involved in, and I think we do something like that as adults. For men, there's a lot around fear. I'm not allowed to admit that I'm scared, and so I do everything to cover up my fear that I have. Maybe I drink too much. Maybe I don't feel like maybe I abuse drugs. Maybe who knows what I. But
say that again, William, because you just kind of faded out a little bit.
Oh, did I fade out?
You faded out just a little bit, and you were talking about for men, maybe using drugs, or maybe using other things to keep from admitting I'm afraid. I'm
afraid. I'm afraid I don't feel like I'm enough. I'm worried that I feel like I'm too short. I'm worried that my people don't think enough of me. But as a man, I'm worried that I'm not up to being the husband or father that my family want me to be. But as a man, you're not really allowed to express fear. So for men, fear is one of those subjects where we'll do everything not to talk about, not to deal with. And like those school children, we think it's something to be ashamed of. Mm-hmm. We think that it's an enormous thing. And what I'm saying to people is, look, work out what your thing is. And it may be several things, but work out what those things are that you don't feel great about. Mm-hmm. And just say, and normalize it, because it's normal to feel fear, and it's normal to feel everything that you're feeling has value. It has value to you. Most of it's actually based on fact, and it's okay. You probably aren't as tall as you would like, and probably not as successful as you would like, and it's better that you come to terms with that and just go, that's okay. I'm good enough being just the way that I am, and maybe I can do a little bit more, and there's always room for a little bit of hoping and dreaming and driving, but I've got to stop living in a place of regret and fear.
And I think until any of us stops regretting and fearing what was, what is, we'll never move into the next thing, the next best thing, because we're so steeped in what could have been, what should have been. You know?
It's just pure negativity, isn't it?
It really is. And one of the things that I think is really important for people who don't journal, and what I have found, and lots of people who journal, is that that's when you can be your freest, most honest self. And you don't have to worry about what others are going to say back, because, you know, in this book, you ask some very profound questions that make the reader think about their life and the wholeness of their life. And you have the freedom to write that down without any condemnation, without any judgment. And I think that that is where a lot of us miss it, because we don't ever get to the truth about who we really are.
It's true, not with ourselves. And then even if we're in a place where we want to be, it's still a struggle to both find the right language and find the right audience, somebody that's going to understand what we're saying. That's why the journaling is so good, because at the end of the day, it's your language. And I encourage people to write in their journal exactly as it's happening in their head. Don't change the language. Don't try to make it sound better. Don't try to interpret it into something. If you're sitting there thinking, oh God, I'm terrified, I think I'm going to be alone the rest of my life and I've screwed everything up, write that down. If that's how it's going, write that down. Put down the pen, see how you feel about that for a bit. Reflect on it.
And what I do is I write it down, just like you said, just as I'm feeling it at that moment. And then, you know, in a few days or a few weeks or whatever, I'll go back and look at that and revisit that to see how I'm feeling from where I was to where I am.
Yeah, for sure. And that's part of the DRT process, is something I call the final synopsis, where at the end of all of your questioning and answering and journaling, and when you feel like you're ready, you write a synopsis where you reflect back on your whole journey, the journey of your life, and your DRT journey, what you've learned, what you believe, what you've come to know. But yeah, journaling is just fantastic. And even to this day, if I'm overwhelmed, the first thing I do is I just pick up in fact, even a scrap of paper will do, but I think it's always nice to have one's own journal. And I write in there, exactly what I'm thinking and feeling. And it's amazing how much better I feel just for having got it down. You legitimize it somehow. It doesn't just feel like this, recurring craziness in your head. It's just like, oh no, look, there it is. That's what it is. And that's quite normal to have those feelings.
I like that. And so what's the most important thing that you hope that all of the people that we believe are going to pick up running with mindfulness, dynamic running therapy? What's the most important thing that you want people to take away?
Well, this is not a difficult question, because my journey has been one. It's taken me a long time to learn this such important thing. And I say it to everybody, it all begins with a single step. Wherever you are, whatever's you're struggling with right now, whether it's a mental illness, a physical illness, could be obesity, could be drug addiction, could be despondency, depression after a breakup, could be grief. If you feel stuck and you feel like you're hopeless, just get out there and move just a little bit. 1 foot today, tomorrow we'll add another one on. And if you're anything like me, you'll be amazed by how far you can get if you do that. But the trick is just one step at a time.
I love it. Running with Mindfulness, Dynamic Running Therapy, or DRT, to improve low mood, anxiety, stress, and depression. Tell people how they can get the book in the United States, and most importantly, William, how they can connect with you.
Okay, so the book's available in all good bookstores as well as on Amazon. And as for me, you can find me on my personal website, dynamicrunningtherapy.com. You can also find me at Pullen Therapy on Twitter, and Dynamic Running Therapy, running with Mindfulness on Instagram.
William, it has been a great pleasure. Thank you so much for your thoughtfulness in writing this book and sharing with our listeners and our viewers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, everybody, stay on point. We're back right after this. Good morning, everybody, and welcome. I'm Carlette Christmas.
And I'm Glenda Stock, and this is our final point today, On Point.
Glenda, our guest this morning, joined us all the way from London, England. not really a new concept, but something that we forget about. The book is called Running with Mindfulness, Dynamic Running Therapy to Improve Your Low Mood, Anxiety, Stress, and Depression. And he also deals with fear and all of those emotions that will really debilitate us if we're not careful. And he just talks about really movement and how coming out of yourself and moving your body can really help you to tamp down some of those things that get in your head and cause you just such angst.
Absolutely, and did a great job, I think, of capturing that message. And we've heard this all our lives, and some of us have been down those paths with health issues that put us in a situation to need to have those physical therapies and walking regimes and such later. And I remember so vividly in the recovery from my open heart surgery, of course, was encouraged to begin walking real early, very soon.
And why did they say so?
Because I think, again, there comes with open heart surgery that inclination to go through a state of depression. And as our host today talks about, our guest talks about today, movement is the best medicine to combat depression, movement. And so they talk about beginning slow and only so many minutes and so many steps and, those kinds of things. And paying attention to your breathing, as he mentioned as well,
Yes.
the noticeable difference in your breathing patterns. And I remember coming home and thinking, oh my Lord, the last thing I wanted to think about doing was going out my front door. And
did you just want to lay down
I
after?
did. Yeah. You just want to know everything's
still.
okay, and you don't want to do anything that disrupts anything. And there's a built-in fear syndrome, I think, that comes with that. And all the more reason the discussion and the prescription, if you will, from the doctors with regards to this therapy. But I recall it was cold. It was in February, and it was very cold. And my sister was with me, God love her, helping take care of me. And at first it was such a dread to go outside the door. It was like, oh, I just can't. It's cold. I can't do this. But day after day after day, then I found myself feeling kind of, refreshed when I would come back in. It was like, it's like you've accomplished something. It was like, okay, wow, look what I did, know? And it begins to restore your inner strength, emotionally and physically.
Yeah.
It does.
And
so there's real power in mindful walking.
Right,
There is.
And for a lot of people who are runners, and he talks about like what you and your sister did, like getting a partner. And he said how therapeutic it is to begin to talk about what's going on internally. Because sometimes we can become so private and not want to share what's heavy on our heart, and we just hold it in. And he talks about really people that are going through sort of similar circumstances, and then you can kind of really relate to each other and lift that burden while you're moving all at the same time.
Right. I think that's a great direction as well, because what you contain on the inside, more often than not, can turn into something that was never intended to be.
Yes.
And it's true. There's a lot more room on the outside than on the inside.
That's good.
To contain some of these emotions sometimes. And getting them out just allows a much more honest look at them. And, all too often they're not nearly as dreadful as they seem when we tamp them down and allow them to stack up one after the other, and they become overwhelming to us. So I think there's a lot of truth in that guidance as well. The thing that we all know and we hear it, that, that moving and having that physical component in our life, regardless of maybe how simple it seems to be when we start, using the stairs versus the elevator and parking further away in the parking lot, and just those tiny actions on our part to help us start taking some responsibility to put movement in our life.
Right.
And you know, I remember taking care of Mom in her living assisted home after some health issues that she had. And we would walk those halls. And I can recall one day Mom saying to me, well, look at there, we made it 5 times down the hall today. You know? So in her little mind, she was counting and feeling a sense of accomplishment. And I think there's great value in that. And I think it restores the fact that we're in control versus whatever it is that we are concerned about being in control.
Right. And when you look at, Glenda, 18 million people that are dealing with some sort of internal issue, that's a lot of people. And if we're not moving, then we become really stagnant, almost like dirty water.
Right.
And the less, and that might not be a good analogy, but the less you move, the less you want to move.
Right.
And then before you know it, you can't move at all.
Right.
It's a struggle.
And it talks about, you know, the chemical buildup, the natural chemical buildup in our bodies that begins to take over and affect our joints, our muscles. And
atrophy was the word I was looking for. Yeah.
Absolutely. You know, and we see that all too often. And, you know, it was amazing to me sometimes the simple movements for my mom that she struggled with. But as she would do them day after day, how much easier they became. You know, so much wisdom here in terms of really heeding this message. And you know, we're not all runners. I'm not a runner at all, and never really enjoyed the act of running. But I do enjoy the feeling I get after some form of movement and exercise.
Right, and you just have to find the movement.
Find that motion for you.
Because I love running.
Yeah.
It gives me, it fills me with just so many emotions, and it's a time where I can just let loose and just let my mind wander and go. But one of the things that he talks about, and you and I talk about a lot privately and personally, is journaling.
Yes.
And the importance of that. And sometimes if you're a journaler like me, you can get away from it because of time. And then like now I've come back to journaling, and it is so therapeutic. And you just wouldn't think that writing would be that therapeutic.
I've never been one to journal, but I really, I'm going to do that. I think that there's a lot of value in what he's saying, and I can see where common messages will present themselves and allow you to have a greater picture, you know, of really what's going on. You know, we think we understand ourselves.
Right.
And we think we know, you know, because we're in control. We have a handle on everything.
Sure.
Wrong again.
Right,
You know?
right.
But when we step back sometimes and allow ourselves to really see the patterns, probably the closest I ever came to that was during, you know, the tragic times of just grief with David, of actually writing down some of my feelings, you know, and then going back and reading those over a period of time to see where tiny bits of healing were beginning to set in, and tiny, you know, changes were occurring emotionally. And I think it's a very powerful exercise to be honest enough with yourself to put it on paper.
But this is what I love about journaling. It's there are your feelings.
Oh, yeah. No rights, no wrongs.
Yeah.
No judgment.
Yeah, and you can be totally honest. And then when you look at what you wrote 3 weeks ago or 3 months ago, you know, you can really assess where you were then and where you are now. And, you know, anger, happiness, fear, anxiety, you know, you can write all of that down. And as you write it down, for me, you know, sometimes answers start to come.
Right.
You know?
Yes.
And as you said, it's often not as bad as we think, but you have to get it out of yourself. Otherwise, it'll take hold and it'll prevent you from really doing those things in life that we were created to do.
I agree, and I think that it's a simple thing to add to your daily recovery, whatever that might be. So we appreciate our guest today and his wisdom, and we know that his thoughts can help all of our listeners and viewers because we understand the fact that having a sense of control about what's going on in our world will probably never go away for any of us.
Right.
And his wisdom today, I think, underscores that strongly.
Absolutely. We're out of time for now. I'm Carlette Christmas.
And I'm Glenda Stock, and this has been our final point today on Point.
Stay with us, everybody. We're back to wrap up right after this.